The view from my corner office stretched across the harbor, sunlight dancing on the water, where fishing boats still bobbed like stubborn survivors. I traced the rim of my coffee cup with one finger, feeling the smooth porcelain against my nail, polished a shade too daring for a Monday morning meeting. My assistant had just left a stack of contracts on my desk, and yet I couldn't focus. Because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, I ignored it. Then curiosity won. A string of missed calls from my mother. 2 voicemails from my sister, Amelia. And finally, an email with the subject line that made my breath catch. We need to talk about the business. The business. My fishing business. The one they'd secretly sold years ago to fund Amelia's PhD. My chest tightened, but I leaned back against the cool leather chair, forcing myself to breathe slow. They didn't know. They never knew. The irony was almost laughable. While they were busy cashing out my future to build hers, I had already bought the business back, piece by piece, in silence. I smoothed the silk of my blouse, a habit when I wanted to steady myself. Outside, a gull screeched over the docks. As if mocking the storm, I could feel rising inside me. My family wanted a conversation. What they were about to get was a reckoning. I was 22 when I first realized my family never saw me as more than background noise. It was late summer in Maine, the kind where the air smelled of salt and diesel fuel, and the boats rattled against their moorings like restless children. My father had passed away only months before, leaving behind his pride and sweat, Carter Fishing Company. I believed, naively, that I would take his place. I'd grown up on those docks, my palms calloused from hauling nets, my skin burnt red from long hours under the sun. He used to ruffle my hair and call me his first mate. I thought that meant something. But the day I asked about my role, my mother barely looked up from the kitchen table. "Emily, sweetie, this isn't your path," she said, her voice soft but final. "Amelia has opportunities. You'll understand one day." Amelia, my younger sister, was always the golden one. Sharp, ambitious, bound for academia. She sat across from me with her nose in a stack of papers, barely acknowledging the conversation. When I pressed further, my mother's patience cracked. "This business won't survive without real investment," she snapped. "We've already spoken with buyers. Your father would want us to be practical." Her words hit like ice water. My hands shook so badly, I had to clench them under the table. My inheritance, my life's work, my father's legacy, sold without even asking me. I stumbled outside, gulping air heavy with brine. My grandmother, who had been staying with us after the funeral, followed me onto the porch. She pressed something into my palm, a small brass compass, worn smooth from years of use. "Don't let them steer your ship, Emily," she whispered. "You know where you're going, even if they don't." That night, I packed a single duffel bag. No plan, no promise, just the compass, a battered laptop, and a heart that burned with equal parts grief and defiance. As the bus pulled away from my hometown, I watched the lights of the harbor fade into the dark. I promised myself one thing. If they didn't believe I could captain my own life, I would prove them wrong. The first year away was the hardest. I landed in Boston with barely enough savings to cover a month's rent on a tiny studio that smelled like damp plaster. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbors' late-night TV shows, and the radiator hissed like it held a grudge. Still, it was mine. My own place. My own start. I worked odd jobs at first, waiting tables, unloading boxes at a warehouse, anything to keep food in my fridge. But at night, I taught myself everything I could about business management. I scoured library shelves, watched free lectures online, scribbled notes until my fingers cramped. I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to learn how to turn survival into success. My first break came through a woman named Sandra, who ran a small seafood distribution company out of the harbor. She was tough, sharp-eyed, and blunt to the bone. When I showed up at her office asking for a chance, she sized me up like I was another fish on the scale. "You know how to haul nets?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said, steady. "And you know how to negotiate a price without getting fleeced?" I hesitated, then admitted, "Not yet." Something in my honesty made her smirk. "Good. Means you're teachable." Sandra became my first mentor. She didn't coddle me. She pushed me, sometimes harder than I thought I could take. Long days blurred into longer nights, balancing ledgers, learning supply chains, understanding how contracts worked. I'd stumble home, too tired to even kick off my boots, but inside me, something was growing. Confidence. Purpose. My first win was small, a contract with a local restaurant that agreed to buy lobsters directly through Sandra's company, with me handling the logistics. I'll never forget standing in that kitchen, shaking hands with the head chef, my palms clammy but my smile unshakable. That first check, though modest, felt like freedom. Over the next few years, I carved a niche for myself. Slowly, carefully, I started saving, not just money but knowledge, contacts, leverage. I studied markets, tracked competitors, and quietly invested. Piece by piece, I began buying shares in smaller fishing outfits, sometimes under shell companies, sometimes through silent partnerships. No one in my family knew. On social media, I kept things vague. A picture of coffee here, a random city skyline there. If Amelia or my mother asked, I said work was steady or fine. I didn't lie, I just never gave them the whole truth. They assumed I was still scraping by, hustling for scraps. I let them believe it. By the time I turned 28, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I had enough capital to buy back Carter Fishing Company, quietly, through a broker who never disclosed my name. The papers were signed in silence, the ink binding not just a business, but my father's legacy back into my hands. And as I looked at the deed, my grandmother's compass resting on the desk beside me, I realized something. They had stolen my future once, but I had reclaimed it, on my own terms. The knock on my office door came just afternoon on a Friday. I already knew who it was before my assistant announced them. My family had finally decided to show up. When I said yes to the meeting, I chose the conference room with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. The sunlight poured in, glinting off polished mahogany tables, framed nautical charts, and the sleek glass case where my father's compass now rested like a centerpiece. I wanted the room to feel both familiar and foreign, to remind them of what they once dismissed and what I had built from the ashes. My mother walked in first, stiff in her pressed beige coat, followed by Amelia, clutching a leather satchel as though it carried the weight of her degrees. They both stopped short. Their eyes widened, flicking over the space, the curated art on the walls, the silver model of a trawler, the quiet efficiency of the staff moving just outside the glass. "Emily," my mother said at last, her voice catching. "This is impressive." I smiled, leaning back in my chair, the silk of my blouse cool against my skin. "Welcome. Please sit." They lowered themselves into the leather chairs across from me, still glancing around like they'd stepped into another world. Amelia cleared her throat. "We didn't realize you were doing this well." "That's because I never told you," I replied evenly. There was a beat of silence before my mother spoke, her hands twisting in her lap. "We need to discuss Carter Fishing. We've run into some complications with the new investors." I let the irony simmer in the air. "New investors?" I repeated, my voice edged with amusement. "Mother, that company doesn't belong to you anymore." Amelia frowned. "What are you talking about? We sold it years ago." "Yes, I cut in to fund your PhD. I remember." My eyes locked on hers, steady. "But what you didn't know is that I bought it back. Every share, every piece. Carter Fishing isn't theirs. It isn't yours. It's mine." The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the city outside. My mother's face drained of color. Amelia blinked rapidly, as though trying to process words she couldn't quite believe. "That's impossible," my mother whispered. "You couldn't have had the money. You underestimated me," I said softly but firmly. "While you were busy deciding my future wasn't worth investing in, I was building one without you. And now, everything you thought you'd sacrifice me for? I've already reclaimed it." Amelia's voice cracked as she spoke. "You mean you own the company?" "Not just the company," I said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were the documents. Deeds, contracts, proof of ownership. I own Carter Fishing. I own the docks. And I've expanded into distribution. Everything you see out that window, everything that keeps this harbor alive, I've touched it in some way. They flipped through the papers, their disbelief painted across every strained movement. My mother's hand trembled against the page. Amelia finally set the folder down, her face pale. "You kept this from us," she said quietly, almost accusing. "I had to," I replied. "Because if I told you, you would have found a way to take it from me again." I stood, smoothing my skirt, letting the silence stretch before I delivered the final blow. "You sold my birthright to pay for Amelia's dreams. Too bad, because by the time you signed those papers, I was already halfway to buying you out." The words hung heavy in the air, sharp as salt in a wound. My mother closed her eyes, shame flickering across her face. Amelia looked at me as though seeing me for the first time. For once, I wasn't the background noise. I was the storm. I let them sit there, staring at the papers as though they might rewrite themselves. For years, they had spoken over me, dismissed me, treated me as though my dreams were expendable. Now, the weight had shifted, and I could feel it in the way their shoulders sank, in the silence that pressed between us. Finally, my mother found her voice. "Emily, we made choices we thought were best for the family. Surely you understand that." I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. Best for the family? Or best for Amelia? My tone was calm, but my words cut sharp. "You sold my future to build hers. And you never once asked if I wanted to be part of that decision." Amelia flinched but didn't argue. Her silence spoke louder than any defense she could have offered. "Now," I continued, "you've come here because you need help. And you're looking at me, realizing that the daughter you counted out is the only one who can fix what's broken." My mother's eyes welled, though she blinked the tears back quickly. "Emily, please. What do you want from us?" For the first time, I smiled, not cruelly, but with the calm authority of someone who finally knew her worth. "Conditions," I said. "If I'm going to extend help, it will be on my terms." I turned to Amelia first. "You've spent your whole life chasing prestige, hiding behind degrees and accolades. If you want me to support you, you need to do something real. Something that helps people outside of academia. Start a program, a project, I don't care, but it must serve more than just your resume. And you'll report progress to me every month." Her lips parted, ready to protest, but when she saw the resolve in my eyes, she only nodded faintly. Then I faced my mother. "You always believed control was the same as love. But if you want to stay in my life, that ends now. No more decisions behind my back. No more guilt-tripping or comparing me to Amelia. You'll respect me as the woman I've become, or you won't be here at all." Her shoulders trembled, but she gave a small nod, eyes lowered. I leaned back, letting the silence settle, the compass gleaming faintly in the glass case beside us. "These are not punishments. They're boundaries. For the first time, I get to draw the lines. And you get to decide if you're willing to honor them." Neither of them spoke right away. Amelia stared down at her hands, twisting the strap of her satchel. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue she pulled from her sleeve. For the first time in my life, they weren't towering over me. They were listening. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't revenge. It was balance. The weeks that followed were strange, almost fragile, like walking on newly frozen ice. For once, my mother called to ask how I was doing, not to lecture me. Her voice carried hesitation, but also something new, respect. Amelia emailed me drafts of a proposal for a community program she was developing, a scholarship fund for young women from coastal towns, designed to help them pursue careers in marine sciences without losing their roots. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I didn't trust change overnight. But I could see the flickers, and that was enough for now. One evening, after everyone had left the office, I stayed behind, letting the quiet settle. The harbor lights shimmered in the distance, reflections rippling like stars scattered across the water. I opened the glass case and held my grandmother's brass compass in my palm. It was warm from the day's light, its needle trembling as if alive. Her words came back to me as clearly as if she were standing beside me. Don't let them steer your ship, Emily. You know where you're going, even if they don't. I smiled, a deep, steady smile that carried years of scars and triumph. She had been right. For so long, I had let my family's choices dictate my course. But the moment I chose myself, my path, my fight, that's when everything changed. I slipped the compass into my pocket and turned back toward the harbor view. My journey wasn't just about reclaiming a business. It was about reclaiming me. And as I stood there, shoulders squared, heart steady, I knew one truth with absolute clarity. They had tried to write me out of the story. Too bad, because I had already bought the ending.